We are here. We are sitting back in our classroom. Well, you're in the classroom. We're in the studio. I am your co-host, Professor Adam, and sitting next to me, he's going to be doing the bulk of the talking this episode. He's got a real tough fantasy matchup this week, and his quarterback's questionable. I can't say that I feel bad in that situation.
Three guys on my team that are questionable. I got literally a quarterback, my main running back, and my main receiver.
Yeah, and for people that don't give a shit about fantasy, I really don't blame you for not caring to hear that.
Grown men watching other men that are younger than them play football and trying to get points off them.
Yeah, he's a man that is off the market.
I'm also a 4-time champion, so as far as the make-believe part of it goes, I can make believe pretty good.
I almost don't even want to give him a rap love this week because we're in competition. But yeah, he is big pimping on BLADs. That is Professor Chris.
BLAD. Blades?
Yeah, it's a Jay-Z song. Big Pimpin'?
Yeah, well, I know the song, but I'm trying to see what you're spelling.
BLADs.
Oh, D's, because
yeah.
DESD. Okay,
yeah.
I got you. Yeah.
I don't understand rap lyrics most of the time, but eventually...
You don't have to, you just have to listen to them.
It just sounds great.
Well, thank you for that marvelous introduction. Man versus nature. I think it was... Has it...
I already got to disagree. I don't even want to start this way to disagree. This is nature versus technology.
Okay. Well, initially, now it might be, and I don't even think it's like a competition or anything like that. I think it's just one of those situations. You know, we've discussed like civilizations, cultures, we've discussed wonders of the world and that kind of stuff, but I think sometimes you kind of forget that there's actual like natural wonders of the world.
Just shit that we have really we can explain it scientifically, but it's just a modern marvel. Like, you just stare at it and it's like, or an ancient marvel. It's like, what the fuck is that and how did it get there?
Like, it's beyond ancient. Like, it existed there, like, no one will be able to see it change. Like, aside from, like, you know, there's rock slides and shit like that. We're talking Everest, people. I'm just going to come out and say it. But...
Just like the title said.
Just like the title said. Again, this should not be shocking. It's just crazy, like... Okay, so it's the tallest spot on Earth from sea level up. It is...
What do they call it? Earth's roof? Some shit like that?
I'm not sure.
I think it's Earth's roof because you can't get any higher and still be on Earth.
Oh, that would be true. Oh, technically, yes. So are you saying the people that are flying aren't on Earth?
No, it's not land travel. It's not in the stars.
So you're just floating?
Yeah.
You're
hovering. It's magic.
Okay, well, speaking of traveling, to kind of put it into perspective, 29,000...
We got to hit a cut point so we can start.
I know we do. Listen,
we can't be throwing numbers out.
I'm not already getting ahead of steam. I'm just warming these people up. You can't just listen. You can't just have educational intercourse with these lovely people that are listening right now.
Oh, we're just
and just jam a giant mountain in them. You got to warm it up.
Yeah, we're gonna have to cut this up.
I don't have to cut shit. You know what? You've thrown me off my groove. Cut to the theme. A chance to listen to our lovely theme song and cool myself down. We're now in the episode. Are you happy?
Yeah, it's sort of a tense week in the studio.
It was 3 minutes, folks. He thought it was 7. I think someone partook heavily before the episode.
I can't argue that. We had a little snafu in planning this week. Professor AG doesn't read text messages super well.
I might not have phrased it very well.
I'll take full blame for this, but I think it's going to be a great one for the people. Chris did some studying on a topic. I did some studying on what I thought was this week's topic. So we're getting learning episodes. I did a little bit of looking into Everest, but Chris is going to handle the bulk of it because
That's fine. I like to talk. I feel like
he
I
likes
talk the
it.
most anyway.
Yeah,
And I have just questions to pummel you with anyway. So you're probably weren't even going to get to your information. Because a lot of this is just going to be me stating a fact and then just sitting here slack-jawed being like, isn't that amazing? You're going to be like, blowing your fucking mind. So getting down into nitty-gritty. So you were mentioning, air travel and your theory that essentially that doesn't mean someone exists on Earth once they're in the air. So Everest being the highest point on Earth, 29,031 feet, 8.5 inches. We've got it down to that. I don't know how. I'm assuming it's lasers.
a man measured that.
Yeah,
A
8.5.
woman just would have left it at a round number. A man's like, there's 8 more inches on there we're not getting credit for.
And a half. Let's not shortchange this baby. So the cruising altitude of like modern airlines is somewhere between like 34 and 36,000 feet. So this is literally sitting 4 or 5,000 feet below that.
I did see that at the time of the first ascent, the first finished all the way up to the top ascent on Everest, passenger planes, commercial planes couldn't even fly that high yet.
Really?
Yeah. So
okay. So are you saying when Everest, because we're going to discuss kind of the history and how it's a mountain, but it had to be discovered essentially by the people that gave a fuck about climbing it. Are you saying that at that point the planes couldn't? Because that's definitely, I don't even think there were planes around then, but are you saying when they summited the first time, planes couldn't even get over it?
During the first summit.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That was like in the 50s, so.
It just, that blew my mind just to think that we actually, we couldn't get anything up and over the top of Everest.
He was just in an elite club being at that altitude. Like people that flew were like, I've flown that. He's like, I've actually stood higher than you've gone.
Oh, that's cool. You guys were in planes. I was still higher than you, standing on the ground.
So Mount Everest, it's on the mountain range that separates essentially China or Tibet. I'm going to refer to a lot of this as Tibet because when they're talking about the history of it, Tibet was still... We're going to have to figure out what the Free Tibet thing was. I was too young when that happened, but I still have references to it.
I believe...
It was China's takeover of a country.
China took over Tibet and booted the Dalai Lama.
So I'm just still going to refer to it as Tibet. Free Tibet.
Yeah.
I'm pro-Tibet.
We're right there.
So it was basically on the border of Tibet and Nepal, and it's in the mountain range. I'm going to go and butcher this, but it's the Mahalangur Himal subrange of the Himalayas.
I think you nailed that.
So in the Himalayas, just to kind of give this context, because this is what, I'm a visual person. We have a map that we're looking at right now of it. Everest itself, okay, think of it in this sense. The height of Everest, have you seen Mount Rainier, right?
Yes.
And you've seen it just looking at it. Mount Rainier, it's 2 Mount Rainiers is Everest. Mount Rainier is 14,000 feet above sea level.
Rainier's the one in Washington?
Yes.
And then Mount Hood's the one in Oregon?
I believe so.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Rainier Beer.
It's 2 of those. It's insane. It's 2 14,000 foot peaks.
I'd imagine, just to put it in context, Mount Everest is sort of probably like what the Twin Towers looked like in the New York skyline when they still existed.
Compared to the other... Okay, so that section or the Himalayas contain 30 of the world's tallest mountains, peaks.
K2, all that shit.
Yes. Now, even the peaks around Mount Everest... So Mount Everest is essentially the peak that goes up, and I think it's like a 3-ridged peak. Mountains right next to it are literally like the 4th tallest, and then one of them is like the 6th tallest. So when you're looking at Everest, you're like, I mean, I guess that's the tallest out of all of those, but it's literally the highest peak from sea level on Earth. It's a weird thing where you have to adjust your thinking when you're looking at a picture of it because it doesn't look tall in comparison to everything else. But then when you actually understand and you start to get scale of how far back these pictures are from the mountain, you're like, oh shit, these people are standing like 25 miles from this mountain right now.
Backdrop.
Yes.
Backdrop issue. It's like your wiener not looking as big because you got a bigger backdrop behind it.
That's true.
It's tough to do it that way, but that's really just to think about how there's like a mountain range and then it's almost like a belt buckle, you would say, and then there's like Everest right in the middle of the belt buckle, kind of.
Yeah, so kind of, and me and you had this discussion. I can't remember. You brought we were talking about like if the world was condensed down to like a bowling ball, could you
Yeah.
feel Everest? And you're like, of course you would feel Everest, and I don't think you would, because it's not because Everest isn't really tall. It's because the ground leading up to it is just climbing in elevation. That's why when you look at Everest from base camp, yeah, it seems super tall, but at the time you're at base camp, the main one, you're already at like, I want to say the base camp that most people start out with. And there's two ways to get up Everest. I know I'm going to go kind of all over the place on this. There's two ways to get up Everest. One was from the side in Tibet. The other was from the side in Nepal. And the one that is what's considered like the standard route, that one is, I think, comes in from the Tibetan side. Because initially when Mount Everest, I almost said Mount St. Helens, Mount Everest was discovered by people outside of that area, and they were like, oh shit, we should fucking climb that. And the locals are like, why? Because it's a mountain, why wouldn't you? Who was that? Mallory that said that?
Yeah.
He's like, why would you want to climb that? He's like, because it's there.
There's a very tricky thing about this, because what was the first guy's name that didn't make it? It wasn't Mallory, but it sounds like...
No, it was George Mallory. You're thinking because it's Edmund Hillary.
Oh,
and
that's
George
what it is.
Mallory.
It's the Mallory and Hillary thing.
Yes.
Hillary, I think, was the one that said that, because Mallory didn't do a interview after he tried to...
Exactly.
after he tried to
no. It was, he said it because he... Okay, let's just go ahead and get back to the actual stats on the mountain and then kind of the story behind it. So it exists essentially in that area between China and Tibet, or Tibet, Nepal. And it was first, actually, the reason it's named Mount Everest, the real name, it has a Tibetan name. I don't want to butcher it, but the translation is Holy Mother, which makes a lot of sense. It would be something that would be revered, being essentially the highest mountain or deity in the area. That makes a lot of sense.
Well, and initially, too, wasn't it that they didn't think it was the tallest in the range?
Well, yeah, because, like, that's what I'm talking about. It's the comparison thing. If you're already, standing around base camp and you're looking up and it's only, it's 29,000 feet, but from base camp, it's only like 13,000 feet because you're up so high already. You're like, well, this, like we can tell this is a 13,000 foot from here. You had to then determine what you were above sea level. Mm-hmm. So to do that probably took more work. But yeah, initially it was called like Peak 15. So apparently there were other peaks being looked at for being taller. Eventually it was determined, and this guy named Sir George Everest in 1841 was kind of the first one to document it. Of course, it's a British guy.
Yeah, I don't like that.
Well, it's always going to be a British guy or a Spanish guy when we're talking about discovery of this shit, because they fucking put their dicks everywhere.
Well, and they're the ones that wrote the history. We don't have a Nepalese history or a Tibetan history of the finding of Everest.
Because the Holy Mother existed there.
Yep.
At all times. So Sir George Everest is kind of the first one to report back to the crown or whatever that this mountain exists. The mountain ends up being named Mount Everest after him. So the first attempts to climb it by essentially, I'm sure people climbed it to a degree, but here's the thing. You have to be at a certain point in your society or your civilization where you're now just doing hard, dumb shit for fun and for the sport of it.
Yeah, it's almost like there has to be a level of pressure taken off everyone.
Just survivability.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. So, like, it was during the first or second expedition that the British did, and they were talking about the, like, Sherpa people. And I don't mean Sherpa people as in, like, the people that are Sherpa. Did that sound really like...
We got to slow down one of those words. It sounds like you're running them together.
Sorry.
The Sherpa people.
So the Sherpa are actually not like the job of people. I think that's a misunderstanding. When you say they're Sherpas, they think that they're the people that, like, that's the name for, like, guides there. It's the name of a people from the region, are the Sherpa people.
And it's not only just the Sherpa people that are used. There are other sort of... Not really
Tibetan
villages, but
and
different...
Nepalese people and different people, tribes and stuff from the area that they use for porters to bring stuff up to the mountain, to base camps and stuff.
They just all call those guys Sherpas, too.
I saw that there's a lot of differentiation between Sherpa and porter. I think the porters kind of just are more in charge of, like, the yak trains. Yes, this is a thing, yak trains.
Well,
And then the Sherpas are actually the people that help go with them up the mountain. The porters don't do that. Sherpas mean they're also climbers.
They're the guys that are porters are the ones that are in charge of like getting the shit into camp, getting the
Yes.
shit out of camp,
Yes.
and that type of stuff. Sherpas are more like straight up. Porters are just like A to B'ers.
Yep, and they're also the guys that will go ahead of the climbers. This is what's so crazy, in that the Sherpa people and the people that climb this, as far as, not the like guys from Britain and tourists and stuff like that, which I'm not. There's going to be some conflicting feelings in regards to like the commercialization and tourism aspect of Everest, but
Goddamn right.
But the people that are up there is the Sherpas that are staying up there and like repeatedly guiding and everything. Those people are literally they're superheroes as far as this stuff goes. They're able to live in and survive in a place like this, so much so that they just do this as an industry and a job. Hiking Everest and taking people up there is a job for people. Whereas that's a life experience for a very few in relation to how much the population is on Earth. Sherpas are just there all the time. I mean, they're not constantly going up there, come back, and then just go right back up the mountain. But during a season, Sherpas will make multiple attempts to guide people up the mountain and to accompany, expeditions up the mountain.
Well, and even at the same time, it's a lot like the Inca episode that we did where the people just lived in the Andes. Mm-hmm. So their shit was ready to go at any point in time to go up to Machu Picchu.
Yeah.
And when you just have that ability and it's bred into you...
When you said ability as far as the coca leaves.
Well, I'm sure they...
the coca leaves are their oxygen.
That's okay. Yeah. I could go with that. Inca didn't have oxygen tanks, so they were just chewing on coca leaves. But their bodies are just built different. Their lungs take in oxygen different.
Built different.
Yeah, but that's the thing, is like that's just evolution at work, making sure that these people can survive in there.
So getting back to that point, I strayed away from that. The guy came out during one of the first expeditions, and they're like, well, why hasn't... Because none of these people that lived around this area in, Tibet, Nepal, no one was like, yeah, no one's ever climbed to the top of this that we know of. And so they got this misunderstanding, like these people don't have it in them to get up to the top of the mountain. No, because one of the first people that got up to this motherfucking mountain was a Sherpa. What it was is there was no reason for them to do that. Like, to risk... Life was already probably pretty fucking, like, risky living in the area that they did. They didn't need to add additional danger for no gain. That's not going to get them more food. If a Sherpa was the first person to make it up there, and there wasn't a documented case of it, then it probably would have been passed off if it not happened, and that person would not have been famous. They'd been like, well, old Jeff in the village actually got up to the top, and they're like, oh, well, it must be easy then, or some shit.
I think that it's a lot like you were saying, where they didn't need to. They had probably pushed it.
They
up
had
a
other
ways.
shit they had to worry about.
Yeah, that like staying alive.
They didn't have someone being like, hey, we'll pay you to go hike this mountain. No one was offering them that opportunity.
They already understood that at a certain altitude, shit just didn't grow.
White people, fucking rich white people.
Well, and the other thing, too, is there probably wasn't anybody in a Nepalese or Tibetan village that looked like Winston Churchill.
That's true.
There was no portly Tibetan people at that time, because everybody was trying to survive. And so I'm sure when the British people rolled in, they're like, weird, all these guys seem to be in shape. What, that couldn't be a big deal.
We're so fucking out of breath, and they're just strolling along.
Yeah.
So in the first attempts to climb by the British were in 1921. And they were able to essentially reach... I'm going to use some terms that are going to sound weird, like I'm going to talk about base camps. There's a base camp called the North Col. And the North Col, the main route that most people take to the top is different from the initial route that like the first couple people try, because they're trying from a different area, a different location. So the North Col basically is at 22,970 feet. And it's hard to describe unless you're looking at a map of it, but it's not like base camp and then you just walk from base camp and you're at the foot of Everest and you start just hiking up that way. The reason that this was so crazy to have, and so much effort had to be put into it, is the mountain itself, from like where you have to camp to start hiking, is literally like 12 miles to the summit in the route that you have to go. 12 miles. And in that 12 miles, you're going an elevation difference, yeah, like of 13,000 feet. After you've tried to then even acclimate yourself to the base camp where you're at, which is, at 13 or 14,000 feet. Or sorry, base camp is at 17,000 feet.
I think that also goes to the point of just the uniqueness of this sort of mountain range is it wasn't really like a meandering crawl up. Your elevation change was going to be pretty steep compared to other mountain ranges.
There's different places where it is, which is so crazy because, like, it's not what you think of when you're just like mountaineering. Like, if you're watching like someone just go up a mountain, there's a whole bunch of different like mountaineering aspects. Like, you have to at one point cross this thing called the Kunu Icefall. It'll be easier once I go into the actual route and everything.
The crevasses.
It's nuts, man. Like, the amount of danger. Like, learning about this, I still think that it's weird that there's this commercialization of it, but I understand when you see like the images. I'm sure during your research you saw the image of the line trying to get up to the top of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
It looked like fucking Six Flags.
It did. And here's the thing.
Cold Six Flags.
It does. I looked at it the same way before really digging into this, and I was like, fuck, man, like, they're ruining it. Like, it's not special anymore because all these people, I thought it was just like a Disneyland ride assembly line, like going up and they're touching it and then coming back down. Those people have all been waiting for the 3-day window out of that time to try to make their attempt. And it's not like those people have been sitting at base camp just waiting for the weather to clear and then they head up. Like, I hope after this, I'm not saying it's, we're all these tourists coming to this country and like technically if they hold this mountain as like a holy deity, there's conflicting feelings on it. But by the end of this, like, I hope to at least maybe kind of like got people thinking about what that actually looks like. It's not bad like that image of people waiting in like gridlock at the top makes it sound. Like, I have a respect for those people because I know how much those people are putting into this to even get into that line and how dangerous it is to be in that line and what you would have to tell yourself in order to get out of that line and turn back. You might never get a chance to make it up there. Getting back to where in 1921, they basically get up to this thing called the North Col. And the North Col, like I was saying, being at 22,000 feet, they still have roughly 7,000 vertical feet to go. That's just the height difference. That's not to say how far it was. It was still days of hiking to the summit, because you can only hike for a few hours a day just because of the elevation change and how brutal it is. So it's not like you're going on a 10-hour hike and you go from base camp to the summit all in one go.
No.
And so they got to this place called the North Col, and these guys are wearing like wool trousers and like wooden heeled boots and everything. I mean, as much mountaineering as they could and like stuff they could move around in, but like these guys don't have fucking North Face shit on.
Gore-Tex is not even...
No, they don't even invent that until like literally the third expedition about like a windproof, waterproof fabric. That's like a canvas. But these guys are also in like cloth tents, like setting up here, having to bring wood to burn a fire. There's no jet boil and stuff like that. Like, and these guys on this expedition aren't all like British guys just doing it by themselves. They've hired a ton of porters and a ton of like people like Sherpas and things like that to assist them. So again, from the very get-go, all of this stuff about like discovering the first attempts, if I don't mention it, always assume that if there's any of these English dudes, there's like a Sherpa with them and about 10 Sherpas behind them making this shit happen.
If there's any white people on the mountain, there are many, many Sherpas and Tibetans and Nepalese
many people of varying
there.
darker shades
Yes.
on the mountain with them. So that's the furthest they reached during that 20 expedition. Now, at this point, too, they have no freaking clue about any of the weather in this area, when they can actually hike this thing. The times that this can actually be summited, there's 2 times a year, and you have to wait for windows in the weather during like those 2 months of the year. And so it's not even to say that during that it's a 30-day cycle where it's like, all go up there. The weather still has to permit. These are just the times in which the jet stream, it's up so high it's in the jet stream. And the winds at the top that can come over are 200 miles an hour.
It could
sweep.
away.
It could sweep. You would never be found. It could carry you right off the mountain.
But just to think, like, they're almost literally above the weather because they're in the jet stream. Mm-hmm. Like, that's how can you be above the weather?
Yeah.
On land.
Mm-hmm. And so, there's these certain points. So, and they didn't know about that. So while they're doing this expedition, they're not just trying to hike Everest. They're also doing like geological survey of all the other areas around it, finding other mountains, trying to measure them and all that kind of crap. They have specialized teams that are like trying to get up to the top. Because every country, of course, wants to be the first one to say that they put their flag on the top of it, and any other country that comes after them is going to have to see that.
It was a space race on land.
Exactly. It was as close to the space race as they could technologically get at this point, man. Closest to the moon. So they come back in 1922, and they find basically another route along the North Ridge. And so the North Ridge is, I want to say, like, they get up to 27,300 feet. They're the first people above, and I know I'm referring to feet. We have a lot of international listeners. What's up, guys? I heard a lot of references to meters. I'm sorry, I don't know the conversion to meters and everything like that. So I'm just saying feet, but I did write meters here just this one time. So they were the first guys above 8,000 meters, which is 26,200 or 26,200 plus or minus feet. First guys above that.
Well, and what is the death zone?
So the death zone starts at, let's see, I want to say like above 20. You know what? It might actually be 26,000.
Well, and it's called the death zone because your blood literally, there's not enough oxygen in the air to oxygenate your blood. So the death zone is not just like a funny, kooky name like Puss Out Ridge or anything like that. The death zone is where just literal death happens if you don't have a substitute for the oxygen that isn't in the air.
So it's 26,247 feet.
Jesus Christ.
So they made it right to about there. So here's the thing. They probably have no clue at this point that there's even, in 1922, they have no idea that there's a point in which the oxygen is going to be way different.
Yeah, that it just stops.
I mean, it might have been, when you're hiking, because a lot of these guys, it's not like they were just British guys that happened to have been on like Rump Spring or a fucking bachelor party. These guys, when they identified this mountain, were sent on an expedition by the British government and benefactors to be like, climb this thing. We want Britain to have, that to say. So when they get here, they don't know, they've practiced or they've been known mountaineers that have gone and hiked the Swiss Alps and have gone and hiked these other peaks. I don't know how many of those other peaks got to the point where in the death zone, I think you're at a third of the oxygen that you normally operate at. It's a third of the oxygen in the air. So once they got to that point where they were on that second one and they were, set up camp or kind of sat there for a little bit, can you imagine that feeling when you started to breathe and you're just like, what is going on? Like, you would notice that you're having trouble breathing and not getting enough air. At that point, you would just, if you're with another British guy, you look at each other, you're like, okay, this is fucking unexpected. Like, what is this?
It is, but at the same time, the way that it really just came to me is it's such a tricky thing because you've already been on such a long, arduous hike for so long.
That's what I'm saying.
Your
you
body's
don't know
going
if
to
you're
be
just
wearing
tired.
down eventually. So you don't really understand that it's not just the wear and tear from getting to where you are.
That's
it's
exactly
just that
what I'm saying.
Yeah, there's no oxygen.
You're like, I'm usually not this gassed. Well, we have been hiking for the last fucking 3 days.
But not only is it that, there's just nothing there to oxygenate your blood.
So they end up, that's as far as they make it, is up to that 26,200. So, I mean, they're right at the death zone. I don't think they really know if they can get up any further. And at that point, those guys aren't going to, they're like, hey, we'll just come back next year. We're going to keep getting funding for this. So there was no expedition in 1923, I think because of World War I. Oh, no, because that one, that ended, that was already ended, even before they did the first expedition. I don't know why there wasn't one in 23. But in 24, this is the big one where there's weird did they, didn't they summit attempt. And this is where two guys, George Mallory and Andrew Irvine, come in. And George Mallory, I think, had been on the previous two expeditions back in 22 and 21. And he had been partnered up with a couple different guys and then some Sherpas. And I'm not sure if he was the one to reach the 26,200 feet, but when they came back this time, they brought oxygen with them. I should have looked into this more, but in 1924, I mean, how are like you're having to weld and create airtight bottles, valves, gauges, all that stuff, and then be able to put in more pure oxygen. Like, how, is that technology exist?
Yeah. The issue though is, I don't think they had like aluminum yet. So you're talking about steel, basically like steel oxygen cylinders that weigh 10 times as much as an aluminum cylinder that is then filled with... They had liquid oxygen back then.
Okay.
So, but you would have to be able to carry something that fucking heavy that far up the hill when before they're like, well, we just got tired before. You guys don't really need this oxygen stuff.
And there was this weird shame, like stigma in the community of mountaineering, be like, oh, you need oxygen, because people could use it once it became available. There was, no getting around the benefits. Like they even said during those first expeditions, you could double your climbing speed by being on oxygen just because your body was able to work that much more effectively.
This shit was Lance Armstrong in the Tour de France.
And so it's not to say that Everest was the first time it was used. Other climbers were using it, and that's why there was this stigma of like, well, people have gotten to this peak without oxygen, but now you're using oxygen, so that's kind of a cheat. They found out they were going to need this on Everest. And so they had devised a way to they factored in and were like, well, it takes 4 bottles to give us enough time to try to, get to the summit. And during there were 3 different attempts. It was, I want to say Mallory and another guy, not Irvin, went together and they got up a little ways and had to come back. Then he sent another 2 guys up there, and then Mallory wanted one more crack at it. He's like, but I want Andrew Irvine to go with me because apparently he had proved himself really adept at actually manipulating the oxygen system to get its peak performance.
Yeah.
He was a younger guy. He was a pretty good mountaineer and everything, but I think Mallory looked at that and he was like, I can either take a stronger climber or I'm a pretty strong climber. I've made it the furthest, I think, so far. I'm going to take the guy that gives me my best shot at being able to use the oxygen system. And that guy had also tinkered with it and made it lighter and stuff. So,
or here's your third option. He chose the one guy that he knew for sure when shit hit the fan up there that he could kill and take his oxygen.
Do you think that's what it was? I don't know if that was much of the thought at that point.
If it's a life or death situation, I mean, it's like being trapped below water with one respirator between 2 people.
Here's the thing,
you might
dude.
have to make a choice.
Correct, but I think what gets kind of underestimated on this, and when we start talking about the people that have died on the mountain,
Not enough.
no, I don't think. Yeah, I was shocked the number was so low. But what the thing is, the reason there's so many bodies still on the mountain isn't a weird well, we're not going to disturb them type thing. No one has the strength when they're doing that to get the bodies off the mountain because it's a 200-pound frozen awkward popsicle that you have to drag down, and that's 200 pounds. You're so exhausted from the 4 days you've previously had to hike to make a summit attempt from base camp that trying to use any of that energy is literally putting yourself in a situation to die. You're on oxygen already up there to even try. No one's going to take the time to send groups up there to remove the bodies. They've brought down a few, but there's still, man, out of the people that have died there, I think, as of November 22nd, 300 people have died trying to summit. That's also to say that people have also been rescued. Mm-hmm. People have also not made it up high enough to get in that position. People have gotten to more critical positions lower on the mountain to where they were able to out. So 300 people have died. 200 plus bodies still remain on that mountain.
The other thing that I guess that I just learned through this and didn't really think of before is, I guess dead bodies at that height just really freeze to the ground quick once you fall.
Yeah.
If you just stop moving, apparently you just freeze to the ground.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about Mallory a little bit, and then I watched a documentary that was weirdly just really unsettling about how casual they were around a dead body.
Oh, green boots.
No. This is different than that. So, kind of getting back to Mallory and Irvin. So they are, leaving base camp, and I'll go through the stages of how to get there after we get more into the modern ascents of Everest. So it takes them, they have people. They're not just going from their base camp. They have, I think, 3 camps set up. So you'll go from your base camp, you'll hike up to another camp, and usually you'll stay the night there. Acclimate a little bit. You have to rest. You're hiking probably 4 to 5 hours through elevation during this entire time. Then camp 2 or camp 1 to camp 2, doing the same thing. You're going to stay there. Now, keep in mind that there's multiple trips that have been being made up to these other camps by porters and Sherpas to bring stuff up, because when you leave base camp, you're not taking all of the oxygen with you to get all the way up to. You're basically like, all that stuff is there to make the climb even easier, that these Sherpas have stocked up and set up. You're not getting up there and camp's not already set up. You're getting up to these camps and the tents are already there. Your just priority is to basically try to rest.
How fast would you be fired as a porter if you just got tired on the way up there carrying the oxygen tanks and you just started ripping one, and by the time they got up there they didn't have enough oxygen?
Man, when I saw the pass that they have to go through this, and know that these like porters that are the Sherpas have to go and like prep these things, it's sheer insanity, because it's not like, well, I'll get to it in just a second. That's kind of a long thing I want to talk about. So they, stay the night, get up to, I think, camp 3, stay the night there again, and then this is in June. So I think June 8th is when 1924, June 8th, this is when they actually get up to like camp 3 or camp 4. I can't remember how many camps they had on that side of the mountain, but they're going to make their summit attempt on June 8th. So for actual like summiting, like I said, the 2 times a year that they really recommend doing this, June is not one of them. There's the winter, there's also monsoon season, and you're like, well, what's monsoon? Well, it can get warm, snow can get shifty, avalanches. Like, this thing is fucking, should be just called Murder Mountain.
But it's not. Somehow there's only 300 people that have died.
I know, but that's because I think there's so many people that have developed routes and paths, and you have these Sherpas that are laying lines and setting up ladders and shit. I keep getting away from the route. Yeah. Sorry. So apparently they were last spotted, and I'm trying to figure this out in my head with technology back in 24, binoculars, telescopes, things like that. A filmmaker was with them and said they were last spotted 800 vertical feet from the summit. So that's not to say that like they were standing on the ground, they looked straight up and they're like, the summit's 800 feet above us. It's basically like you're on the ridge, and 800 feet up and out in front of you, you're still having to hike this ridge up to the summit. And at this point, you're also in the death zone. Oxygen is scarce. You have oxygen, but it's not like the stuff they have today. So there were these 3, I think, steps that they had to go through to get. And when I say steps, I don't mean like instruction steps. Mm-hmm. There's 3 steps on the ridge trying to get up, and you're like, well, why don't you just go around the steps? When you're on it's like a ridge that is up at a point. There's very little wiggle room going right or left. And so they have to get up this like one ridge that I think is like a kind of a gravel, like sloped area where it's like very like loose rock that you could slip. And any fall here resulting in a sprain, a break, sliding down, you're dead.
Yeah.
There's no one that can rescue you at this point. No one has the strength or energy to do so. So they saw them below the first step, I want to say. And that was the last anyone ever saw of them. So there's always been
For then.
Yeah, up until 1999. Unfortunately, this isn't like they found him living in a cave on the mountain in 99. No, it's not like that. So during a previous expedition before 99, whoever had went up there next or a few expeditions later, they found an ice axe that was stuck in like one of the steps. The step, when I say that, think of like a step, but it's a vertical face. You have to climb, and then it's like a little flatter area. Then the next one.
It's like 15-foot tall steps.
The second one was like 15 feet tall, but it was sheer straight up. Whereas the first one was longer.
That's how steps go.
Correct, but what I'm saying is like, I mean like also a step, like it goes up steeper and then flattens out. They just called them the 3 steps. The second one is, I think, the second 15-foot face is where they found the axe. And it turns out it was Irving's axe. They were able to like somehow through
Wrote his
pictures
name
and
on
other
it.
people that talk. Yeah. And so there was finally, they kind of had an idea where something may have happened. And so in 99, I think there was an expedition to go and find or look for Mallory's body. So basically, these guys are going up all of this just to try to find this guy's body. I think they summited at the same time as well. But in 99, they find a body, and it has the clothes have kind of been weathered and rotted away a little bit, but a lot of the stuff was still existing. And they found like a label on the inside that said George Mallory.
That, and I would imagine at that elevation, the wind is probably going to fuck with things, but the cold is going to preserve things very well.
It was so crazy to see. It looked fake, but at the same time, I knew it was real. The body was
you
like,
actually saw this guy?
yes.
Really?
So he
Okay.
was laying face down. He had a broken rope tied around and cinched around his waist. It had squeezed so tight that you could still see the imprint in the body. It had like either snapped or had been cut, and he was laying face down. So basically, the mountain is so big when you look at it. It's weird to think about, but like, it's so enormous and you're so far back from it. It just looks like there's just steep sides all the way down. But what you can't see are the slopes come down, but some areas flatten out where like rocks will catch, like a little flat, but barely. But I mean, it's all completely like not, you're not going to go camping down there. It can just catch snow when it comes down there. He had somehow fallen and slid down that and was face first buried partially in rocks like this, like face down, arms up, kind of like, hey, put your hands up. His body was weirdly preserved where his skin almost looked like it was just kind of frosted over, and he had just shrunk a little bit from the loss of muscle, but there was like no rot until they went down by his legs where he'd broken his legs and they were breaks that came out of the skin. So what do you call those?
Compound fracture?
Compound fracture where it comes out of on one of his legs, and so he had basically fallen, broken his leg. He was sliding down. They said he had a head wound as well that matched his axe. So they say they thought he went to go dig his axe in to catch himself, and it hit something and rebounded off and hit him in the head. But it was so fucking weird that there's just this, like, and the back was like kind of like bare where the wind had whipped the clothes off of it. It was just fucking eerie, man. But like that's just there's these bodies all over. Like you're saying, the green boots. There's a guy in a red jacket or a faded red jacket in green boots that's just off the path under this little alcove where this man literally just crawled and died.
Well, they said before the trail actually led to where you had to walk like over the top of him.
Well, he was under a little bit of a rock. I think it goes off to the side now a little bit.
Yeah.
But I mean, he was like sticking out from under the rock.
And his you can see his boots.
And they
sticking up out.
dude, he's not even covered because the ledge keeps
I thought
him.
he was covered.
No.
Maybe it's just when
They
it
just
really
use
snows.
his
The only
body-
picture that I saw, you could just see the boots and a mountain.
You could see the jacket and the boots and everything. And you can just, I mean, he's a marker now on the trail. They're like, did you get past green boots? So like they'll spot, like, depending on the thaws that happen every year and shifting everything, they'll find bodies at certain points, but no one can get them out of there.
Well, the big question that I'm sure everybody has is, did Mallory fall going up or did he fall coming back down?
So they didn't find his, like, he had a little Kodak, like, personal pocket camera that he took. They didn't find it on him. And so they were like, well, it's got to be with Irving. Irving was like his assistant going up. He would have been the one taking pictures of Mallory. And so they went on another expedition up there to try to find him. They thought they'd gone up to, like, the way that they were hiking up, they'd gotten up to, like, the North Col and then sent a drone. And the guy controlled it and was, like, looking all where they found Mallory. Because they were thinking, well, the rope was obviously, they were tied to each other.
Yeah.
So the rope snapped or the other guy was getting pulled down and cut it. And so they were looking in all these rock alcoves, but they couldn't get close enough. So once they hiked up there, they all summited. And on the way down, like, one or two of the guys went down and looked for him to see if he had the camera, and they couldn't find his body. So they're thinking if he fell, it was just luck that Mallory had slid down and stopped and got partially buried. Had he fallen anywhere else, he would have gone right down. And the guy's like, he probably fell 7,000 feet down the mountain, and he'll never be discovered.
The other just wildly dumb thing that kind of spurs that did they or didn't they make it is, I guess Mallory had taken a picture of his wife to take up and leave at the summit.
Yeah.
And they searched his body. When they brought him back down, there's no picture of his wife. So logically you would think, hey, maybe they he got to the summit and put it up there.
Yeah.
Or he knew that he was going to freeze to death and die, and so the last thing that he wanted to see was his wife.
And then the picture flooded away.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm kind of thinking that's what it might be. He's laying there, his legs are broken. Yeah.
That's sort of what it feels like. It's just saying, "Oh, he didn't have the picture." It's
Well,
like,
and the other thing, too, is
yeah.
the way that they kind of looked at it. They wouldn't have had time to summit based upon the time of day that they left.
Or the oxygen, probably.
The
and make
oxygen.
it back
There were a
down.
lot of signs that they didn't make it to the top.
That's sort of the other thing, too, is when you're calculating oxygen, you're not just calculating oxygen to make it there. You're calculating oxygen to your halfway point, needing to be the point to where you're up there, because you still have to make it all the way back
They
down.
say
with
the most
enough.
dangerous part is actually and even though it's less than half the time, or it's half the time, so it takes you double the time going up as it does coming down. They say the most dangerous is coming down because your momentum is already bringing you down at a downward angle. You're completely gassed from the top. They say the average time people spend up at the top is like 15 minutes, enough to get some pictures, take a breather. But because, like I was saying, it sounds like there's a traffic jam. Imagine there's billions of people on the planet Earth. You basically have people wanting to attempt this. And when you have 2 months out of the year, and then there's maybe a few days or maybe a week or so during that month when people can summit, they've invested so much time and training and effort into it. That's why it seems like, and it's also because there's only one line of way to get up there, one from one side, one from the other, which I think is kind of cool because like people will be hiking up on the summit one side and like coming up and you're like, oh shit, like there is another path.
I had no idea. No clue.
So like they usually spend 15 minutes and then head back, but you're so tired that, you have to, again, like you're saying, have enough oxygen to get back. But that's when like you're trying to be the most careful, but you're also just the most exhausted.
Yeah, it's like any thought of walking down an incline after a long hike. When your quads are so fired up and filled with lactic acid from climbing
You're
it,
coming down on each step and catching yourself and everything.
If one of those muscles gives out and your leg gives out, it's not like, okay, I fell. It's like, okay, you're kind of dead.
Yeah. So, well, that guy definitely did.
Yeah.
So, no, I don't think Mallory made it to the top. But do you know who did make it to the top?
A guy that sounds like Mallory.
Well, he did, but I think Tenzing.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely, the huge contributing factor there. Maybe that's also why Mallory didn't make it up there. He took another Englishman with him.
Bad choice.
So, May 29th, 1953. There was some stuff that went down after World War II where climbing Mount Everest really wasn't a priority and everything like that.
Oh, we're not going to talk about this? We're not going to talk about the dancing llamas?
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. So
I focused on the mountain. You tell me about the llamas.
So on this first Mallory trip, one of the things that they had done was they were trying to figure out how to...
Oh, that's right. They were trying to fucking bring some of the culture back to the fucking people in England.
Yeah, so they, like Chris said, they brought a filmmaker up there to kind of try to film through some things. But as part of the stage show, like Chris said, they wanted to bring the culture with it too. So they actually kind of
Not real llamas, folks.
Yeah, this whole thing was an issue called the dancing llamas. I, going into it, thought just through my white mind, like, hey, these have to be like llamas that they found up there that knew how to dance, right?
I may have thought something similar.
It was just they had abducted these monks, these llamas that were up there, and had brought them back
As in
to
Dolly
England.
llamas.
Yeah. Well, Dolly, I think, is numero uno.
It is, but I meant like the llamas of the Dolly variety.
Yes,
Like
yeah,
people
yep.
within that order. People.
Yeah. So they brought them back to England and basically did like this touring stage show where they would have like these weird mock rituals that these llamas would be doing. And apparently it really pissed the Tibetan people off. And the Tibetan people actually forbade the English from coming back into the country for 10 years.
That's right.
To stop
That's
them
what it
from...
was.
Excuse me, just basically bastardizing their culture like they did.
People did try to sneak in at that point too. The big thing I can't stress enough is you have to have such a huge support system, especially at that time, to even attempt to climb this mountain. It's not like you're sneaking like 10 guys in. You're like, come on, come on, come on. Like you got to sneak like hundreds of guys in and you also need all of the help of the people from the region. So you ain't sneaking in. So May 29, 1953, another British expedition. And this guy, Sir Edmund Hillary, New Zealander. He's a Kiwi.
Very odd.
Kiwi. So he was essentially like a well-known New Zealand climber from a young age. He got invited because there were 2 open spots on this English expedition to go to the Himalayas. He got one of the spots. Really strong climber, and there was a guy along that was one of the Sherpas. His name was Tenzing Norgay, and Tenzing had actually reached, prior to this, he had experience on Everest.
He'd actually gone up, I believe it was the year or two before with the Swedes.
Yep, with the Swiss, and he actually got up
Swiss.
to 28,199 feet the year before. So, if anything, he was like, fuck, I'm almost right there.
Yeah. He saw the summit, I believe.
You can see the summit from, like, the 4th camp. It's just you're looking up the ridge, and it's still...
I thought it, like, disappears into clouds, though, sometimes.
Sometimes, but at the time there shouldn't be clouds because that's when the jet stream's coming over. Again, they've tried to, like... And at this time, this probably allowed them to get, like, more of the weather down of the time that you could actually hike this thing. Or hike isn't even the right word for it. I don't know what to describe because you're having to do... Yeah, climb.
But,
Survive.
yeah, survive, I think, is numero uno. But I think the layoff is... it's weird to say, and it's tough to find the words, but I think World War II is sort of a reason why they were successful in climbing in the 50s.
Okay, explain.
World War II was the first time that we ever saw freeze-dried meals. So, like, MREs and shit like that, we were giving them out there. So they were able to cut down on the heaviness of the materials that they were taking up. Because before, it was just, like, tins of food.
And that food is meant to be, I think, isn't it, like, calorie dense in
Yeah.
order to, like... Yeah.
Yep. So they're freeze-drying stuff that's able to do that. Second thing that's very important, every other time before the World War II that they had tried this, nylon wasn't a thing. They
all
invented
the
nylon
clothing.
ropes for World War II. Nylon is so much stronger than anything else.
It's probably lighter, too,
Yeah.
than if they're having to do, like, cotton cord and all that kind of stuff. Also, clothing is going to be better. All
Yeah.
that clothing that was developed essentially for cold weather operations, like for World War II. That's a really good point. How did I not fucking think of that? So, yeah, huge technological advancement. And also, I'm guessing that there was a huge advancement in, like, oxygen canisters, lightweight stuff. Aluminum started being made for planes.
Well, and like
It's-
you said, too, at the same time, we understood the weather better because we were sending planes up to try to fight through storms to go bomb other places. Like, we understood sort of weather
had
patterns.
better,
And
it had more of an understanding of patterns,
Yeah.
better survey equipment, everything. So, yeah, 53. There was so Tenzing Norgay and Sir Edmund Hillary get teamed up, and they do. It's not just like they get put together and it's like go to the summit, boys. Like you have to do certain hikes. So, I mean, it probably makes sense if I just kind of explain like how the climbing teams work. You basically have to have climbers that like complement each other. There has to be an establishment of trust because if you're just climbing as a 2-man team, when you're not just like near help during any of this stuff, if as soon as you step out of base camp, there's not a support system other than the guy with you. So you have to be able to mesh well, and Hillary and Tenzing ended up like meshing really, really well and got to make an attempt themselves.
Tenzing also wasn't really pumped to go with them. He really liked the Swiss. He wanted to go back with the Swiss because the Swiss treated them like equals.
The Swiss would like, after they made that attempt at the summit but got like super high, like after a successful day, the Swiss would have like their wine with them and treat them like on, like people, be like, hey, we're doing this together. Yeah, and he as like a gift, they gave Tenzing like a red scarf, and he wore it even on the attempt when they actually summited.
Yeah, the Brits had been more forceful in the past into getting into these areas for trade routes.
They
and
still
other
have
things.
that mastery of like the Indian area and the subcontinent
Yeah.
and all that kind of stuff. Like,
So the feelings between the British and these people, I'm sure, probably weren't high altogether.
he didn't. It's not so much Hillary. He didn't want to. It was just he didn't want to hike with the British.
Yeah.
He didn't like doing this thing. But hey, they actually kind of developed a really good relationship as far as the climbing went and everything. He had saved his life not on the summit attempt, but there was like they had been hiking up to like different stages to acclimate, and he went to go just kind of jump across a crevasse.
I like
I've heard
crevasse so
okay,
much
I've heard
better.
crevasse so much that
Yeah.
I'm saying crevasse now.
It just
Okay.
sounds so much cooler.
I'm not going to call someone's butt like, hey, your crevasse.
Bear Grylls is a survivor.
When we're
He
talking
calls
about
them
mountains,
crevasses.
they're crevasses. He just thought he could jump across it. Well, he jumped and landed on the other side, but the ice was weak on it. And as soon as he heard it crack, Tenzing positioned himself. It was just those two. And if these crevasses can be hundreds of feet deep, you're on a glacier. For a lot of this, for like the first 2 days, you're hiking on a giant chunk of ice.
So that is the number one reason why I'd never do this. The first sign that would, if I paid all that money, the first sign that I wasn't built to do this would be they talked about some of the things that I had just listened to today, that it would sound like thunderstorms were happening, but it wasn't thunder.
It was the ice cracking and shifting
Yes.
and collapsing in on
If
itself.
I knew that I was going to be walking on ice and I just hear all these other large booming cracks around me, I'm not doing that shit. I'm off there so fast because it could just crack right under your feet.
Okay, I'm going to get past. This is the last part of history, and then I want to actually. This is the coolest part. I want to go through what it takes to get to the top,
Okay.
because that's even the craziest part. So, yep, without much fanfare, Tenzing Norgay and Sir Edmund Hillary first documented ascent. They did use oxygen. Who the fuck cares? They made it to the top of this thing. I'm sure Tenzing, after getting that close before, was the stronger one on the climb. I believe he said that he allowed, because he was the leader in the expedition, the Mallory was like attached to the rope like 10 feet in front of him. And so technically Mallory got to the top first, but like by 6 steps.
Well, the cool thing that they did was for like 20 years afterwards, they had agreed to not answer the question of who had crossed first, who had gotten up there 1st, because that was the number one question, was who made it up
Did
there
they really?
first. Yeah.
Well, that's fucking
so
cool.
They agreed with each other that they were never going to mention who did it. And it only came out in Tenzing's autobiography. He actually came out and he's like, Mallory was first. So it wasn't even like one of them wanted the credit for it.
This is probably stupid, but that's kind of cool. Okay, so I could see that, like, if Mallory hadn't, him, like, pressuring Tenzing and be like, listen, like, I'll pay you extra. You don't have to say, just don't say anything. Like, for him to try to get that. He's like, just let me have this, I'll pay you extra, I'll make it worth it for you. But the fact that, like, if that's true, and he had no incentive to not say. It was just like an honor amongst those guys, which I think is the best thing. Like, it showed him that despite, it was at least a glimmer of like that weird thing that like there was a mutual respect. And at that point, he respected the guy enough that survived with him to get him up there. That probably saved his ass on multiple occasions on the way up there. Was like, you know what? Let's both share the credit. We both did this. I would not have made it here. Like, maybe that gives you have to gain some type of perspective.
It's brotherhood
doing
at that
something
point,
like this,
because
yes.
your lives are literally in each other's hands the whole time. I do think part of it, and part of the reason that Tenzing finally said something about it, was you just come from. You couldn't have chosen two more polar opposite people. You have a British guy that's there for the fame and the glory.
Mm-hmm.
You have Tenzing there that's because this is a holy sight to him, that he is about to be the first one out of anybody of his people that have been there. Like,
there's also probably a stigma about those people maybe helping fucking colonizers fucking hike this mountain.
I think, though, when he got back down, it was like there was fanfare. He got bonuses from the state and everything.
Yep.
And he didn't really like that because that really wasn't his life. He had been on these trips and expeditions so much and been kind of told all you are is the help. He didn't see himself as the hero of the story.
After a while, I heard some stuff about his life and everything. When all was said and done, he had some kids and everything like that. He opened Tenzing Norgay Expeditions. His son now runs it and everything. So, like, it does have somewhat, but I got to get into the climb. Yeah. That's even crazier. So there's 2 base camps, opposite sides of the mountain. So the one that we've been kind of talking about where Tenzing and all them went, that was, or I'm sorry, like the initial Mallory and Irvine, those guys, they were about 12.5 miles from the summit. And they were in Tibet, so that was 22 miles. That's called the North Ridge ascent. The most common one, when Nepal was then reopened, people were able to fly like and come into Kathmandu. I fucking love the name of that city, by the way.
Great song, too.
Right. I'm going to Kathmandu. Yeah. So that is actually the base camp there. You're 22 miles from the summit when you leave base camp. So we're going to talk about the Southeast Ridge Trail because climb or ascent or whatever, because that's the one that's more commonly done. How long do you think it takes on average to once you're there at base camp? What do you think it to summit and get back? What do you think is the time frame average?
I don't know. It's tricky. I guess knowing a little bit more about it, it's not necessarily how like far you have to go. It's how you have to prepare your body to be able to go that
How much time it
far.
takes to yeah. Would you think so 40 days?
It takes 40 days from base camp to get up there?
Yeah.
I thought it was like 2 weeks.
Nope. So this is what's crazy. So I know I like these
Yeah.
facts and all this kind of shit. So just to usually get from like the furthest point that you can travel by like actual vehicle and everything, you can either come in from this place called Loxa. I can't remember exactly what it's called, Laka, but you can either come in through like hiking or like ox train to carry your equipment, that kind of stuff, like porters, or I think you can fly in by helicopter. So most people that are getting to base camp just to hike the mountain aren't coming in by helicopter. Total overall, you spend 19 days traveling to and from. So I think they said that it was like 8 or like 9 days
Oh.
up. So you have to literally pack yourself, and you're even going up elevation at that point. So you're going from a city, and it takes about 9 to 10 days to get from that city to hike up to base camp.
Okay, I thought you were talking earlier about like from where everybody's ready to go and then up.
I am. That's once you're there. It's 40 days once you're there.
Okay.
That's not taking into account. So you have
Jesus.
10 days on that side, 40 days, another like 8 or 9 days on the other side of it.
So you're like 2.5 months on this whole thing, probably.
More. If you have night, that's 20 days, 60 days.
But just to think about like
Yeah, 2 months.
2.5 maybe though, just to like decompress once you get done and then like ramp yourself up to go.
I don't know if there's places to do that here. So
This is just mentally.
Yeah.
Like if you're thinking about it and you're like, okay, 6 days that I'm headed to climb Everest, your brain's not gonna be able to focus on shit
it's
else.
not. It's not. So once you get to base camp is, when you look at like pictures of it, it's the one with all the tons and tons of tents. There's other camps that have a lot of tents, but this one is like, there's almost looks like there's like permanent type structures and everything.
That's what it is. It's built for permanence because it's
Yeah.
base camp.
So 17,700 feet is where base camp is. So for the first like 3 to 6 weeks that you're there, what you're basically doing is you're starting to trek up to the higher camps. You're not even thinking about your summit attempt. All you're doing is you're going up to camp 1. Then you're hiking back from camp 1 a few times. Then you go base camp, camp 1, camp 2. You do that a few times. 3 to 6 weeks, you're just acclimating yourself. So you'd be like, okay, so you're only going, base camp up to camp 1. Like, each leg of this is just insanely dangerous every time you do this, and you're doing it multiple times. So when you get from base camp and you start, acclimating and everything, the Sherpas that you've hired, if you need, like, this isn't something you do on your own. Mm-mm. Like, you have to have like a legitimate, like, a lot of people that have tried to do this on their own are like 200 plus corpses, or some of the 200 plus corpses still on the mountain.
I don't even think that it's legal to do it alone.
They had a
now.
situation where I think he had a Sherpa, but it was literally the Sherpa support ended at base camp. And it was this huge controversy about like there needs to be more of a responsibility of letting just anybody or like that can just get here to go up, up the mountain. So when you first
Maybe that's why there's only 300 people that have died.
because there is a responsibility and everything.
Because there are guides.
Yeah, because the guide is like, you're not going any. That's true.
You would probably that guy would have to have full power over it to just be like, no, you're gonna die.
Yeah.
Like you would have to sign over like your free will.
Like at a certain point too, you wonder how many people summited, and then on the way down, just because of oxygen deprivation or because of weakness, they had to sit down, and that guide has 2-3 other people that they have to move, and they're like, I can't stay here.
Yeah.
Like you already have, like you can't make it down. I have to save these other 3 people. A lot of situations probably like that. So while you're doing all this stuff, while you're, starting to get acclimated and everything, your Sherpas are going out into what's called the Khumbu Icefall. And what this is when Everest, there's a big flat side on one of the sides. It kind of goes down between it and this mountain called Lhotse, and basically another mountain named Nuptse. And these are like all within the top 10 tallest peaks in the world. They form almost like a bowl. And so all of the water drainage comes into this bowl and freezes into a giant glacier or a glacier. Do you like how they say the glacier too?
I like crevasse. I like glacier better.
Okay. So it freezes into a glacier right there.
Yeah.
That glacier, it does get warm enough at certain points on Everest, especially because it's so high up in the atmosphere. The sun, although it's freezing wind and cold, the sun can burn you, and it's pretty brutal. So it'll melt this, melt water and avalanches, and basically it runs down through this area called the Khumbu Icefall. Well, then it snap freezes. So think of it like, I don't even know, just walking through a giant field of giant rock pillars, but they're all ice, or like giant blocks of ice just shifted. You know what it is? It's when you fucking dump out Legos. Dump out Legos on your floor. How they all lay on carpet, all at different angles and sticking up and everything. That's the Khumbu Icefall. And when I say icefall, this thing is literally like half a mile wide, maybe more. And to get through this, you have to, it's not just like stuff you can step over. You literally have to set up like ladders and ladder bridges to go across while you have like this stuff. I'm showing a picture right now, you guys can't see, but basically imagine just basically all these pillars of ice falling over on each other, different levels of ice that's cracked up. You know what a good comparison is? Do you ever see those videos of like Lake Michigan in the winter where all the ice is getting swept up onto the bank and it's just all crashing into itself, all of the sharp pointy edges? That's kind of what the Khumbu Icefall is. So the Sherpas have been out getting busy, basically going through and trying to establish paths through the icefall because it melts every year. Like they have to go in at the beginning of the season, or like people have to establish paths to get their expeditions through. Like not every path is going to be accessible that was last year. Things have shifted, gaps have sealed up. There's been avalanches, ice falls, and they have to try to develop these safe areas to go through here.
Well, that shit happens while people are on hikes too. Like you can just have a crack in the ice that was going through your path that you have to figure out how to navigate.
So the only time that you can go through this is you have to wake up and leave at 4 or 5 a.m. That's still at a time when everything is so cold that it's frozen. Any time after 6, you're too deep into the ice fall when the melt starts to happen, and that's when you start to get these ice things shearing off and falling in on themselves. Where you're talking about the sounds in the afternoon, that's when you start to hear the cracking and the falling in on itself. So it basically like starts moving in the afternoon.
Pass. Yeah, I'm out.
Yeah.
That's not...
And so you're doing that multiple times to go ahead and like you have to have also your Sherpas and your porters. Your stuff's not any further up the mountain at this point. So even if you're not making trips and going further up the mountain, part of their job is to like take your stuff up to the next camps and get them set up, just so you can maybe make a summit attempt if the weather permits. So once you get from, that's like 1.6 miles going through this ice fall. Once you're acclimated, they say a person can make that in 3 to 5 hours.
It's so much hurry up and slow down.
I know. And you're waiting in line to go up those ladders and in queue, and you look down and there's a fucking crevice below you that you can't see the bottom of it. And you're walking with those, the crampons, like the spikes on your shoes, trying to walk on a ladder. Like, this is why I think these people, if they're going to make it to the summit, wait in that motherfucking line. I'm not saying these people aren't batshit crazy. You have to have a very, very hefty amount of insanity in your head to attempt this, or a fuck you to nature, or just an insane amount of drive where like nothing gets your dick hard anymore, and so now you need to live life on fucking the edge of death for the next 40 days. But like, if they make it past this type of shit, I'm fucking rooting for you to get to the top. Just don't leave your fucking garbage up there. That includes your dead fucking carcass. If you're gonna get up there, get back down so you're not littering on the fucking mountain. That part I do not agree with. I have a very strong stance on that. So once you get to the top of the Khumbu Icefall, You're basically what you're what you're in is called the Valley of Silence. So that bowl that I was talking
Yeah.
about, so that bowl, wind doesn't whip in there, get in there. They say it's so eerily quiet. All you hear is the shifting and cracking of the fucking ice that you're standing on.
Again, that's hard pass. That's weird though, because you would think a bowl like that would have crazy acoustics. So you think that you would hear kshing,
No,
kshing,
no, no,
kshing
you
as you're
do.
walking
You don't
through.
hear the wind whipping from outside.
Oh, so it's
so
the
quiet.
you don't hear the external.
All you're hearing is the snowfalls falling off the side and the avalanches and the ice shifting. So the
You probably
camp.
don't want to talk too in case you accidentally set off an
I
avalanche.
think you're saving your fucking breath as much as you can, even at this point. So in this area, this Valley of Silence, you're up at 20,000 feet. So you've already gone up 2,300 feet at this point. So this is what's called the Western Cume. It's a Welsh word. It means valley, and it's CWM. It's really weird. But he named it, so it's called the Western Cume. It's Welsh for valley. And basically, it's this huge, flat, giant snow bowl and everything. Can you imagine being in something like that where you're surrounded by literally some of the tallest mountain? Like, when you look up, yeah, they're so far away from you, but is that claustrophobic as well? Considering that you can't see anything else on the other side of them because everything is so enormous.
I think the big thing is snow blindness has to be a huge deal up there, right?
Oh, 100%.
And
It's
you'd
one of
think
the
in a-
biggest dangers.
In a bowl where everything
have to
is
wear
white,
goggles.
You have to figure out though, like you just have to sight in on something. I don't think
The
there's
person
a whole
in
lot
front of you probably.
I don't think there's a whole lot of checking things out.
I was going to say, I think you have to be kind of like moving your head up to try to get a sight line that hits a
Yeah.
rock or something like that. Because if you're looking down, yeah, that's what I'm saying. There's nothing but white below you. But you also have to be looking down because, yeah, it's flattish, but it's flash. It's not to say there's not cracks that you could fall down into, like these crevasses. So it's got steep sides on like 3 sides of it, and you're walking straight into it. So this camp that you get before you start walking across this Western Cume is essentially Camp 1. It's the one on top of the ice falls. They said that the biggest thing, the craziest, is at night when it's dead silent, there's no movement around and not any wind whipping at the tent, and you hear the ice shifting. And all you're thinking, like, you can just like, but you can, it's so loud that you can hear it, and it could be miles away from you.
And the sounds are going to echo where
Yeah.
you are.
But I mean, and all you're like, you're trying to sleep, just being like, technically, I could just be, my tent could be on like a 15-foot thick
Hey,
packed snow, and a crevice could open up on it, and my tent could disappear in the middle of the night.
You just feel like you're living probably on a sinkhole all the time.
That's what I'm saying. I think every moment of this, you just have to be like, as soon as you take that step out of that initial base camp, you're already in danger of going up there. You're in a higher likelihood of accidents. But from base camp, when you step out there, you're just like, I have to be completely okay with death at this point.
I also think too, when we talk about that only 300 people have died there, how many people have summited? It's like 7,000?
No. So there have been 6,871 summits. Those have been done by 4,042 people.
That's the thing that kind of throws me off is 300 doesn't sound like a lot, but also that number doesn't sound like a whole ton.
No.
So there just must be like, it had to have been a very recent thing. Like there was probably like 52, 53 whenever they first summited, right? And then for the next probably 50 years, there was probably maybe 15 people that had summited at that point.
Yeah, and like you're saying, man, I think a lot of those accidents, there's a ton of there's blizzards that have happened. There's been avalanches that have taken out like groups of guys, like larger groups. So you have like higher death tolls in that sense. But still at the same time, you're paying people to take you up here. If they feel at any point that you're not going to make it, you're going back.
Yeah.
Because it's a business for them. They're liable. Well, they're not liable and everything, but it's not going to look too good on their freaking internet or on their webpage.
It's a bunch of private companies that are doing this.
Exactly. And so if you're not displaying that you can do this, they're not going to, if you can't do the initial acclimation type stuff, they're going to weed out people. So that's the other thing too. Like it does sound like a lot of people, but man, when you're talking about over the entire time of confirmed summits, 6,000 dating back to when people started summiting back in 53, it's not a lot.
But that's what I'm saying. It's almost like there was probably maybe like a group of 50 to 75 that happened from like first time to like the 2000s. But
I
then
don't
it
think the
seems like
2000s. I think I get what you're saying.
there's like
though.
a boom that's happening now.
Yes, there had to have been. There was probably a time frame within that 10 years after 10 to 20 years when it was like countries sending their best climbers to do
Sparse.
that and everything. Exactly. And then I think as the world opened up, travel became more readily accessible.
Yeah.
Nepal started being more touristy and things like that. I think when people could come and drive close enough to see Everest, all of a sudden it got a little more available for people to access it. People found that there was money in it. Let's start opening some businesses, drawing people to hike it. So I think a lot of it has happened a lot more recently. You have better climbers too, better equipment. You're higher, much more likely to, if you're gonna summit, it's such a small likelihood, but if you're gonna have the best equipment, it's gonna lead you a lot closer to it. And also the best experience of knowing, like, you see those clouds, like, we're not hiking if we're like climbing this, if those clouds are anywhere near us, and other people might be like, they're moving that way, it's fine.
Well, I think they said the biggest year with the most summits was like 2017.
Really?
Yeah. So fairly recently, we're hitting like the highest of the highs. So like you say, as technology is caught up, just like it helped them catch up for Hillary to be able to make it, we've just reached a point to where it's actually feels safe.
Yeah. So one thing too that I forgot to mention, that one I just pulled up another picture. So on the ice fall, so sometimes what you'll get is you'll get these giant steps that happen too, and these steps, no joke, or what would you say that is, 40 feet?
Yeah.
There's basically a Sherpa that has put together like 3 or 4 aluminum ladders, basically going up like a 40-foot just like sheet of ice. So like, and he's carrying also like in his forearms under his chin, he's carrying another
More
like 2
ladders
or 3
for the
ladders
next one coming
for the
up.
next one. So that's what these guys are doing when ahead of everybody.
The other spooky thing that you do see in some of these pictures, like we see with those lines, those are just like literally freeze marks from where this has grown. And at any point in time, just like an avalanche happens, that's usually the part that can give way. So even what you're walking on the ground flat can split. Going up vertical, it can split as well.
If there weren't these guys doing this, I wonder what this summit number is.
I don't know.
If these guys, if it's just the hardcore climbers that prep for this and everything like that, I'm not, everyone that does this has to be a hardcore climber.
Yeah.
But I wonder how many of these people owe the majority of their success to the Sherpas that were helping guide them.
Well, then it's just as simple as these pictures. If you ever see a ladder that's just been set over an area where people know
And
where
you
they're
didn't
going,
put it there?
Yeah.
It's a Sherpa that put it there.
and there's just no way that you could figure out how to do it without actually being there the first time.
Yeah.
Like you're going to set something up and you might make it over 3 or 4, but you're not going to make it over all of them by yourself.
So as you move from that Valley of Silence camp to Camp 2, Camp 2 is basically just like further down through this valley. That's how long this valley is. You have to basically be walking across this glacier. I think it's 1.7 miles, and it takes around 2 to 3 hours. And at that point, you're completely gassed for having to have walked that. You're still, getting acclimated. So you stay overnight at this camp. The next day, you're at Camp 2, which is at 21,000 feet. So you've gone up another 1,000 feet. And you're at the foot of what's called the Lhotse Ice Wall. So you know how you're in that bowl? Mm-hmm. Basically, the mountain that you're hiking directly straight to. The whole time you've been hiking, Everest has been getting bigger on your left. You're getting closer to like where you can actually come around behind it. So you have to hike this valley that goes along. If you're looking at it like on a clock, I don't know why it refers to stuff because it's just easier to name the numbers. So imagine Everest is right in the dead center of the clock. Base camp you're starting at is basically like at 5 o'clock. And then to go up the Lhotse Icefall, you're heading toward like 4 o'clock, 3 o'clock. And as you walk through this, Western Cume or this big valley, you're kind of at like 3 and 2 o'clock. So you're actually walking around and you're going to actually attack it like from like 1 o'clock. That's like the route that you have to go. You can't just approach it. It's too unpredictable, you're just not able to do it from the get-go.
You got to sneak up on it.
You do. You have to give it. You don't have to do. You have to sweet talk it as you're walking by and be like, "Come on, girl." I'm just here to climb you. I'm not gonna leave anything up there.
Just a 15-minute ride at the top.
I assume you're doing a lot of fucking praying during this entire, like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my
Yeah.
God, oh my God.
I could definitely see how people talk about it being a religious experience. But at the same time, I think getting up there and seeing the magistery and like trying to register in your brain everything that's out in front of you, you kind of would probably have to talk yourself into somebody creating that. But at the same time, like that's just nature. That has to be, you have to really feel some kind of weird connection to where you are.
So you stay the night at this camp right at the foot of the hill, and the reason you have to stay because the next day you're going up about 3,500 feet in this one day. So you're at the foot of the ice wall, and basically the ice wall, if you're looking at it, you have two tall peaks sitting next to each other. The saddle that kind of connects them. Mm-hmm. That saddle, the low part of that saddle is basically where the ice wall is, where they're having to climb up. And at certain points, it basically looks like a back and forth like staircase. Like the staircase on the wall on Game of Thrones. They have like stairs carved into it. Basically, they have lines that are run up that entire thing. You're clipped into a line the entire time you're hiking up this. You have to declip and clip back in and everything. Because if you fall and you tip over, you're dead.
Who sets up those lines?
Sherpas, man. Anytime the lines are set in front of you and you didn't do it, it's the Sherpas. So fixed ropes on this, again, it takes you like 3 to 6 hours when you're acclimated to this to go up this 3,500 feet. And at the top of this is where Camp 3 is actually set up. And it's basically like a rock ledge that's kind of cut into this huge like wall. And tents have already been set up there for you. There's probably oxygen up there for you. This is the last place, they say, Camp 3. It's like the last place that you can actually get like an actual meal.
Yeah.
Like a prepared meal. But like, guess who's doing all that stuff for you to get your calories up and everything? You still got Sherpas doing that.
You're hiring cooks to go up there with you.
Yes, that's what one of your Sherpas is like the Sherpa cook. Again, you're doing this whole thing. It's a 40-day. You're not going to be able to pack in anywhere close to enough shit yourself.
No, and for as much money as I think they do spend to do it, I think they're pretty well taken care of. I don't think you're bitching about what the food tastes like that you're eating at that point.
No, I think you're just happy it's warm.
Uh-huh.
If the food is warm, I think you actually eat like yak or something at a certain point, which is just furry cow.
Well, the other thing too is you have to start.
Can you imagine if yak was like just super, super meat?
I wonder if
it's gotta be, man. Because yeah,
it's a hardy animal, but you almost have to bargain with yourself. Like you're so hungry, you're also so tired that you have to think about the energy that it's going to take to chew that yak meat. Mm-hmm. You'd almost rather just have like a Slurpee or like a Go-Gurt that you can fire into your mouth, I bet.
Well, they say even being up at just the height of base camp, like anytime you get like sick or cold or get injured, it like doubles the amount of time that it takes you to get over it just because your immune system is like, why are we fucking up here?
Are we?
Yeah.
What is this element that I also
I'm
have
working
to deal
hard
with?
just to keep us alive. Like, take us back.
Just saying that though, at the same time, it's also like part of your mood is going to change if you are able to like sit down and have a hot meal. Like your spirits are going to be raised by sitting down and doing something that you would normally do, but just to feel your body fill up with something, and like your body's creating heat on the inside as you're digesting things. Like, eating sounds like it would suck because all the work you'd have to put in after all that, but you almost need it as like a morale boost.
So you're walking, you're at the foot of Lhotse, which is right there. You have to walk all the way down that.
Yeah.
So you get there, and then as you go up the ice wall and everything, after you're up that 3,500 feet, because you've done so much stuff up there, you have to, you're staying in each of these camps again, you're staying the night at, and at each camp, you're getting less and less rest. Because you're just fucking tired and everything. See the tents that are dug into the side of the hill on that?
It's almost like those people that go rock climbing and hang hammocks off the cliffs and sleep in them. Just at any point in time, if you didn't bury those stakes deep enough, you could just slide your ass down the hill.
One of the documentaries I was watching, So they're up on, I think they may have been up at like Camp 3, and a windstorm swept through, and it actually took one of the tents, but it took it so fast that even if there'd been someone inside it, it would have just maybe slowed it down, not even like enough to keep it on the ground.
Yeah.
But it would have just carried them down in a tent down the mountain.
You
There
gotta
were,
hope
there were guys popping their heads out of the tent, calling for other guys, be like, "Hey, you want to come chill in here?" Like, I'm like, are they doing that so that there's more weight in the tent, or
Yeah.
because they don't want to be alone?
Or you just get out of your tent to go get dinner, and a wind gust comes up, and all the shit that was inside your tent that you just used just gets sucked off the hill. You're like, wait, that was all my gear.
Yeah, no
It was
shit.
in that tent. What do I do now?
All my oxygen was in that tent. Be like, you're gonna start heading down, is what you're gonna start doing.
Yeah, there's so many factors that can fuck this up.
So you leave from. So you're already 3 days. 3 days into this, you're now on day 4, and you go from Camp 3 up to what's called the South Col. And a col is basically, like I was telling you, the saddle where those mountains meet. The col is actually the top of where that saddle is.
Okay.
So at this point, like you said, you're up at like 1 o'clock, and you're getting ready to sneak up behind Everest and take it from behind. If the Lady Mountain allows you.
I think she'll tell you if she doesn't want you there.
So the South Col, you are staying here. You're sleeping a night here. But this thing, you can kind of see in the picture there. See how it doesn't look like there's a ton of snow? It's because the winds whip through that so hard that it basically doesn't allow snow to accumulate. It's a saddle between the first and fourth tallest mountains in the world. And you're at 26,300 feet. So you're staying the night here in the death zone. And between, I think, Camp 3 to the South Col, it takes you 3 to 6 hours, and you're going about a mile, a little less than a mile.
How do you sleep in the death zone? You just have to sleep with an oxygen mask
You have to sleep with a certain percentage of your oxygen to keep you from, getting, like hypoxia or whatever it is.
Jesus Christ.
But yeah, they have essentially, and again, all this shit has been brought up here for you and is ready for you when you get up here. And all this has been in preparation for the next moment. This is your base where you're going to make your summit attempts. So you sleep and then you start your summit attempt in the death zone. The most time that you can stay in this area is about 2 to 3 days. And I know that's like death zone, and you're like, oh, is it going to kill you instantly? It's like, not in 2 to 3 days.
Yeah.
That's at the
keep
point
using
where
this
like
word attempt. It's interesting.
it's an attempt to summit. It's not. So many people don't make it even from this point up to the top.
Yeah.
What are you getting at?
You do all this fucking work, and you'd think, oh yeah, the next day, like your Sherpa's like, okay, the next day, guys, we're going up to the top. Once you get up this far, it's still not a guarantee. Like once you've done all this work, it's just attempts, and like part of the attempt mostly is because you need like a break in weather, right?
You have to have a break in weather to even get to this point. And the other thing too, man, is like to get from here up to the top, it's still a mile. That's the picture. I'm gonna try to have Adam actually post this picture as the episode picture. So it's gonna have some tents, and then it's gonna be looking up toward the peak of Everest. You're looking at over a mile to get up there, and
Looks
it's
like
not
the Grinch's house from Whoville.
is exactly what it fucking looks like. And it's not only that, you're going up roughly a little less than 3,000 feet over the course of that mile. And so, yeah, like I said, man, even at this point, if you've made it, when it starts getting steeper and rockier like this, how many times have you like almost rolled your ankle in the house? And everything. All it takes you to do is just one wrong move.
I stub my toe no less than once a week inside the house, and it almost takes me down.
You have to be. And here, you want to hear the batshit crazy part about this? Do you know what time you have to leave this camp to try to make the summit?
Probably like 2 or 3 in the morning.
Midnight.
Yeah.
So you're hiking through this shit with a fucking headlamp on in the dark. And I know because it's so tall, the sun probably hits it before anything else, but you're still going up this for hours in the fucking dark.
Coming from the ground is never going to be as bright as sun, like, coming... how would that be? Like, it's almost like you are catching it, but even in the morning after sunrise, it's still dark.
No, correct. But what I'm saying is, like, as the sun rises, the peak is going to be the first thing into the sun because it's the tallest thing for the sun to come over the horizon for.
Would it, though?
Yeah.
I guess depending on what side of the mountain you're coming up on, though, you might not be coming up in the sunlight.
You are correct. If the sun, depending on which side it is, yes, if the sun was rising on the other side, then you would just see the silhouette. And I think that was actually one of the things they said is there's a way you can hike it when the sun starts rising. It'll silhouette the mountain and all the clouds in front of you, and it's almost like a religious experience. Huh. It's like the mountain orgasm.
What would you do though? That's what I want to know. I want to talk to somebody that got up there, and like first attempt was day one, couldn't go because of weather. The fuck do you go back and do?
You go back and try to conserve and just rest.
But
that's dude.
For like 24 more hours.
Yeah,
though,
you
just
put
have to hang
so
out?
much. We'll talk about the cost and the financial part of it here in a second. But
I
you've
don't
already
think
invested.
a cell phone works up there.
No, you've already invested. A satellite phone might.
But like something to do. Like you can't watch Netflix up there while you're in
fuck
your tent.
no! You're watching. You're bringing a mini DVD player. You're having to like actual like analog.
And it still freezes.
Yeah. So, but man, you made it to this point. You're trying to, stay in this area for as long as you can to get more attempts.
Just mental torture.
It takes like 6 to 9 hours is kind of the range or more to actually do the summit run.
Nice.
As you leave the camp there, you actually go up to what's called the balcony at 27,500. Then you hit what's called the Hillary Step. That's a 39-foot rock wall, and that's at 28,840 feet. And then after that, I think there's one more, like a second step that you have to get through, another technical part of it. And then basically you're walking a ridge where like there's just a trail dug into the snow on the side, and it just dips down and then takes you up to the peak.
Yeah, it's a hell of a climb.
All I'm thinking about too when I'm looking at this line is I'm trying to like figure out who are the people like coming back. Because you can they all look like they're facing the same direction. I'm like, where are the people that are like on the return trip?
Maybe there is. I hate to say it because it still shits on that magic stuff, but if there's an exit trail that's not the same way out, like if it's not the same way out as it is coming in.
Maybe it's on the other side of the ridge.
Yeah.
Like just right on the other side of the ridge, there's another snow trail, carved
and then
in there and everything.
It connects down further or something like that, but... some of the spots, like you were talking about coming down those ridges, it's so tenuous because there's just only so much room on that path that you probably wouldn't want people coming and going right next to each other.
It's not a 2-lane fucking road.
No.
And like you can kind of see on that picture where it shows you're literally just on the tippy top of this. I think they call it a razor ridge. I mean, it's not like that thin but like it's so thin that like literally you could straddle both sides of it at certain points.
Well, and that was sort of what fucked up Hillary and what's his name?
Oh, Mallory.
Or Mallory and
Irvin. It was one of the steps getting up there.
Well, they thought that they had reached the summit, and then they're like, "Oh shit, that's not the summit. That's just like the first step."
They have something called like the South Summit.
Yeah,
I think, and it's just basically like the next highest point, and then it dips a little bit, and then goes up to the actual like true summit.
It's incredible to think that. Just being the first person, like you'd had that false hope that you made it, and then you'd be like, "Fuck, that's 500 more feet." What do we do?
And it's nuts to think that there have been. So I was trying to kind of figure out from the people that have summited. The first people that summited used oxygen. 95% of the summits have been on oxygen. There's been 5% of these motherfuckers, these crazy, insane people,
Not locals.
that have summited without oxygen. I'm assuming some of them have been, but there's been people that have not been from the area that have summited. I think it ends up being like out of the amount that actually did summit, 6,000, you take 5% of that. Fuck, what's that?
5% of 6,000.
Yeah.
Is
Way too many people that then have
it'd be
fucking
like-
climbed that thing without oxygen.
Yeah, it's triple digits. I mean, it's an absurd number.
It's 30, right?
Would it only be 30? 5% of 6,000?
Is it 300?
Yeah, because 600 times 10 is 6,000.
Oh shit! It's 300 motherfuckers have, and I'm sure a couple guys have done it multiple, but like 300 fucking people have summited that thing without oxygen.
There was some guy that they were talking about. He really hot-dicked it because he went up, he hung out at the summit, then dropped back down for like 24 days and then summited again. So like he didn't even go all the way back down. He just got to summit twice because he dropped back down and was able to live up there for a little bit longer before he could pop back up. That's just showing off.
That's a fuck.
It has to be pretty cool though to have to live through that shit and be like, yeah, I want to go back up immediately. Yeah, I want to do that same hike again.
Is that more of a want, or like at that point, is it more of a like a compulsion? I think if you're doing that, is that for the love of it, or is that for just like you're obsessed, or is it both?
Probably both. I think there's a fine line between those two things.
I think you got to be a little bit of both to do this, just because the cost associated. The Southside expeditions are as low as $35,000. The Western guided trips are between 45 and 60,000. I think those are the ones that are more on like the common Southeast Ridge.
Keep in mind too, these are all just good deals. Like there's really no cap as to what some of this stuff.
Oh,
you
yeah.
could have a $750,000 expedition and probably do it in pretty nice fashion.
Mm-hmm.
This is just like if you want to go up, but you don't want to spend your.
If
mortgage.
you got all your own shit.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
Nepalese guide trips can be as little as $30,000. So, but Sherpas usually get around 5,000 per trip. Is that right?
Yeah, it's pretty. I would say that's not great, but it's probably not bad.
And I wonder what the conversion would be, because this is in American dollars, right?
Yeah, so it'd be to rupees, I believe, is what they
Something like that. So hopefully it's a lot more in rupees, because for the love of God, they do fucking everything.
You also have to keep in mind, this is how long did you say the season was?
It's 2 months out of the year. One of them, I think, is in September. The other is in like March or May.
So these guys are making these trips for 2 months a year, and they have to be able to sustain whoever they sustain. Like they have to risk their lives for 2 months of the year.
Yeah, but that's just for the season on Everest. There's so many other peaks and areas around the Himalayas that I'm sure they do other type of guided trips and everything. Especially considering that since Everest only has a season, people that are looking to hike Everest have to be doing these other peaks as like a warm up to see if they even can. So there's probably just an entire industry around there that's like, here's our Everest package. For the first part of the year, we hike you here, here, and here. We give you time to recover. Then we come back and do this mountain. Once you've done this, then, you know, you're able to go ahead and hike Everest.
That's Everest why I think being the tallest seems like it's almost maybe more of like the mountain that gets you hooked.
No shit.
I don't think, and I'm probably going to be way wrong on this, but I think they said that K2 is a more difficult climb than Everest.
Technically, yes. They said it's more difficult from a technical standpoint and like the shit you have to do.
So there's a more dangerous mountain than the tallest mountain in the world.
Yeah, but I don't think it has it doesn't have the prestige.
No, because it's not number one, but it is a
you
more
would have
difficult.
You would have to explain it like you just did. Been like, you know, I've had K2. That's awesome. Are you gonna do Everest? Well, I've done K2. Oh, couldn't get the Everest. Well, you know, technically K2 is harder and more technically, but like, is it taller?
You're trying to justify it from a different.
Yeah, but you have a mountain that has 8.5 inches on it. Does it have that extra 8.5 inches? So you also have, you know, you have your cooking Sherpa, like you said, can cost you $2,000. You got loading and unloading costs for $3,000. You got your permits. You got to have a permit and also like some type of like passport in their country, and that can be like what, 11,000 per climber.
That I believe would probably be factored into like the 45,000.
You think so?
Yeah.
And then some crazy things I didn't know. So we were talking about like, you know, rescue costs and everything. Helicopter evac costs around what, like 4,000 to 6,000 if you have to happen.
If they can get to you.
Good luck explaining that to your insurance company. Yeah. And so you got me going down a rabbit hole. I was like, well, how fucking far up can they reach you? They say that the furthest up that they can actually get is, I think someone was actually pulled off of the Col before, and that a helicopter has come up to the summit, but not like a rescue helicopter. It was part of like a guy trying to get
a mission,
a modified helicopter. The thing had been stripped out. He went on a special diet to get down to a weight enough. And I think he barely got up there. He was able to like sit there for 3 minutes, and then he, I'm guessing, just tried to kind of steer it to fall down the mountain and then control the fucking dive. But you're not getting helicopter rescued at that point. But yeah, it's just, you know, there's this weird thing, like there used to be this big allure to it, and I think there still is, which is why people are still doing it. But that picture of all the people kind of in the traffic jam, I can see why that gets like a lot of like people's focus on it, because they're like, well, it's so easy. It must like have this queue all the time. no, like this queue only exists for a certain small section of the day during a certain section of 1 month twice a year. And all these people that have put in all this money and all this effort and all this training and made it up to this point. Fuck, can you imagine like someone asked you, be like, yes, how'd the Everest attempt go? And been like, so check it out. The line was huge. Can you imagine that being like, I was like, how far did you get from the top? Ah, man, I was like, I don't know, like 50 vertical feet from the top. But dude, you should have seen the lines. The lines were ridiculous.
I don't want to. This is a fine line I have to toe here, because every person that's ever been up there in that line is just leaps and bounds tougher than me. So you can't really
Much crazier.
talk shit on them.
Much crazier.
Yeah. But at the same time, like, you're standing up there in a line on Mount Everest, and you're just like, God damn it, there's so many other people up here that I have to be around. That's literally the only time you're ever going to feel it, because when you come back down, I don't think you tell that story. I think you just tell it like you climbed it up there, just like from base camp.
Oh, yeah, you never explained the line.
Yeah,
you don't
like that's.
But
the only reason we know about that shit is because people have taken pictures. Because
yes.
nobody's coming down and being like, yeah, there was 50 other people with me.
I think that's like the gentleman's agreement between everyone. Mm-hmm. Everyone just kind of looks at each other and been like, line doesn't exist. And they're like, of course it doesn't.
Yeah, this is fucking what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. It's just, you don't tell other people that you waited.
Exactly. But I mean...
Just like how you poop up there. I don't think you tell other people how you do that, because I don't quite understand how that would work.
Did you look into that?
No. But it just...
Very carefully.
You'd have to be bare ass somewhere. And
you got to be doing it in your tent into like one of those airplane throw-up bags.
Then what do you do with it?
Dude, I also don't know this. I don't know if you're eating enough to poop. I don't know if you're having enough calories to have excess waste in your body. I think your body's using every bit of it. And if you're having to poop, very little. Man, I really should have looked up shitting on Everest.
Even peeing, though. Because peeing, you're either going to pee yourself and take a chance on it freezing your body and making you colder, like as soon as the wind hits it, or you're going to have to pull your gentleman out or squat down somewhere.
I wouldn't be surprised if there's some type of product that basically it's like a wearable catheter, except it goes on the outside and you wear it, and it's basically like, this is going to connect to a tube that's going to stay sealed, and the tube is just going to be like, you have to unpinch it and just empty the tube. I'm guessing there's some type of bladder system for that. That would make a lot of sense. Just
like
because,
reverse Wizinator.
Pretty much, yeah. The other thing, too, about that whole line thing that we were talking about, you're up there and you've got to feel like, I could see like someone looking at that being like, does that even make those people feel special because there's so many other people?
Yeah.
I think you know what you had to go through to get to that point. And looking at every single other one of those people, you're like, everyone had to go through all that tough shit. It's almost got to be like, yeah, like a brotherhood.
I think there's probably a lot of that feeling, just because you would have to have it, because it's just there's only so many people that have done it. Like, there's not even a big number of people. That's still a very small town if you just want to talk about population.
Dude, and that's not even to say that all those people are fucking still alive.
Well, yeah.
There's less of those people alive at this point. So, like, meeting someone that actually... I was really surprised of how little information, like, for podcasts there was on Everest. Frankly, with just giving basic information on Everest. It was the story about, like, you know, Hillary and Mallory and those guys and everything. But, yeah, it's freaking nuts. Like, hats off to those fucking insane people that are doing that. Don't leave your trash up there, please. I'm rooting for you.
Cool thing, too. Maybe not cool, because I don't know. I'm not going to get into the 50-50 shit here. 12% of the total number that have come up, 740 women have summited Everest.
Yeah.
That's a hell of a lot of women.
Hell yeah.
I know it's not as many as the men, but that's still a respectable number.
Women have better survival instincts than men.
Okay.
How many times has a woman said, hey, watch this?
Yeah.
Like, women don't say, hey, like 1 out of every 10 women do the, hey, watch this thing. Guys, we do stupid shit. It's back to fucking, like, to come full circle, it's back to the Mallory thing when they asked him, why would you want to climb something like that? Put that in a different, like you put it in a posh British voice, because it's there. It sounds so poetic. Put it in a redneck voice, because it's there. Like, it's the same message getting there. It's like, I see that tall motherfucking thing, I gotta climb it. It's the same thing with kids and trees.
Yeah, kids and trees, literally adult men and fireworks. Like, you're gonna do something stupid. This time, at least, you're tied in and you have somebody watching over. You have a Sherpa supervisor to make sure that nothing goes terribly
You
wrong.
have disposable income enough to hire someone to make sure you don't die.
Yeah, I think the tough part about it is, like you're talking about with the trash, the human element on the earth is just, I think we're pretty much already know for a fact, we're just kind of a bad deal for it. Mm-hmm. Global warming is causing the mountain.
We can't even keep trash off of the most inaccessible place on earth.
The bad sign. But they're caught in such a bind because just like the dream of anybody in the world is to raise your village, raise your city, raise everybody up. This tourism makes so much fucking money for them.
And if they don't do it, someone will step in and it'll just move over to the other side of the border.
But there again, you want to try to bring your people up. Mm-hmm. At the same time, it's at the cost of like a sacred site that we don't really know what the ramifications of that many people climbing up there.
It's
so it's like this weird push and pull of morality. When ultimately, I am happy for the Tibetan people if they're making money and it's not going back to China.
It might be making the best of a bad situation, which I think it's probably more akin to that, or at least was initially and everything, depending on how well it does for their economy and everything like that. Hopefully, there's a beneficial trade-off there.
There has to be a hierarchy, though. Like, there has to be a top Sherpa. Like, a guy that's been up there the most. There has to be a record, right?
For who's been up there the most?
Yeah, like who summited the most, because it would have to be a Sherpa, right?
I would imagine.
Because those guys are going up there, they get multiple cracks at it every year. So you'd think multiple cracks at it every year would have to be...
Yeah, so the people that are actually have the record for it, so it's Kami Rita Sherpa and Lamka Sherpa, most times to climb Everest.
How many?
Let's see. I probably should have looked this up before, but in true fashion, we always at least forget a couple things, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, and we just get interested.
So Kami Rita Sherpa, a.k.a. Thapk, topped the prestigious peak on May 21st of 2019. It was his 24th summit.
Good God.
The most ascents of Everest by an individual overall. Even more remarkable, he'd made his 23rd climb 6 days, just 6 days earlier. Guy is fucking a beast. And let's see, who else do we got here? Who was the other person on there? Oh, and Lakpa Sherpa, since her first summit, hell yeah, since her first attempt on May 18th, 2000, she's achieved the most ascents of Everest, 9.
Boy, that's a real drop-off from the first guy, huh?
She grew up living inside of Everest.
No way.
We're a local kid. Local kid makes good. So, fucking props to them. That's how it should be. That's how it fucking should be.
Yep.
All right, man. You got anything else?
No. If you got a sense of adventure, I recommend this. This is as close as I'm going to get to Everest.
I was going to say, yes. If you have a sense of adventure, but you're not that adventurous, join us. We'll take you on a ride. All right, folks. Well, thanks for joining us again this week, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Peace.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us for another episode. If you like what you heard, hit that subscribe and like button. Follow us. If you didn't like what you heard, still hit that anyway, because we'll probably cover something in the future that you do like. Please follow us on our social media. Adam, hit them with it.
Our Instagram is Historically High Pod, Historically High POD, and we are on Twitter at Historically High. That's Historically HI.
All right. And if you guys want to send in any feedback, suggestions, hit us up on those two, or you can even do it on Gmail. It's historicallyhighpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks again.
Peace.